So this week's lesson is called God Directed His People, and it's the story of how Esther was chosen as a queen and Mordecai hears a plot. The scripture focus is Esther 2, and we're going to learn a little bit more about a queen today, okay? All right, so here is King Ahasuerus. I might not be saying his name correct, but this is King Ahasuerus. And he was a famous ruler. If you notice, he has a crown on his head because he's a king. He has jewels everywhere. Well, he had the biggest kingdom of all. And he was very rich. He was famous. He had power to command armies. He lived in a beautiful palace, which is like a house. And he had dozens and dozens of servants. But King Ahasuerus was unhappy. He needed a new queen. He didn't have anyone. The king's advisors had an idea. Let a search be made for all the beautiful, young, unmarried women in the land. Let these women be brought to the palace, and the king can choose whoever pleases him as his new queen. King Ahasuerus, he liked this idea. We're going to see a picture right here. If you notice, this is King Ahasuerus still yet. And this is meant to be his scepter or like his staff. And it shows young women that were coming to meet him. So he sent out his servants to make a careful search of all the land for the most beautiful women. Many beautiful young women were brought to the palace to learn how to be a queen. They were given servants and whatever they wanted to make themselves beautiful. So you notice the ladies here, they have dresses on, scarves over their faces, jewelry, and they're trying to win the heart of the king. So, there was a young Jewish girl named Esther. Here is Esther right here. And you remember, King Ahasuerus sent out his servants. So, this is Esther, and Esther was, like I said, a young Jewish girl. Her parents had both died when she was very young, so Esther had went to live with her older cousin Mordecai. And here is Mordecai. So this is Mordecai and this is Esther. Well, Mordecai adopted Esther and raised her as if she was his very own daughter. As she grew up, Esther became more and more beautiful. The thing about Esther, though, she wasn't just beautiful on the outside. She was beautiful on the inside, too. She had a really good heart. She was very kind, which means that she was nice to people, and she was very caring. She took care of other people. She was also very obedient. She listened to Mordecai's guidance and did what Mordecai told her to do. But most of all, the most important thing was that Esther, she loved the Lord, and she followed the Lord's commands. So, Mordecai, he took Esther to the palace, and he wanted to see if she'd be chosen by the king, remember, King Ahasuerus, to be the new queen. The only thing was, Esther was a Jew, and Mordecai wasn't sure that King Ahasuerus wanted a Jewish woman to become the new queen. Well, the servants in the palace, they noticed that Esther was kind and that she was caring. They liked Esther more than all the other women. If you remember the other women that had come into the picture, they liked Esther the best. And Esther, one day, it was her turn to meet the king. So Esther was set to meet King Ahasuerus. Okay? Esther walked really tall and straight into the king's throne. She smiled and she bowed very low, still showing her manners. King Ahasuerus decided Esther was the most beautiful young woman he had ever seen. And we're going to look at a verse. And I've only used part of this verse, but it is Esther 2:17, and it says, "And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight." So this was the main portion that we were talking about in this verse. So that's Esther 2:17. So the king, he fell in love with Esther, and he really liked the way that she looked and the way that she acted. Put his scepter, his staff here. How did it King Ahasuerus feel when he saw Esther? Like we said, he loved her. And what did King Ahasuerus do? He set the royal crown on Esther's head. So Esther, she was more fitting and looked like a queen now. And if you notice, on top of her head is a crown, just like on King Ahasuerus' head. The search was over. King Ahasuerus had chosen a Jewish woman to become queen of all Persia. Of course, he did not know she was a Jew. No one knew that she was a Jew. No one except Mordecai. Remember, he kept it a secret. King Ahasuerus thought he was choosing the next queen, but really, it was God that was choosing the next queen. Because God had made Esther to where she was beautiful on the outside, but also beautiful on the inside. God caused King Ahasuerus to fall in love with Esther. God was putting his perfect plan into motion. No one knew what that plan was, but God wanted Esther to be the queen. He would use her to protect the Jews all over the kingdom. Day after day, Mordecai, he sat outside of the palace. And one day, while he was sitting outside the palace gates, doing his job, he tried to stay near Esther so that he could send her messages and still talk to her, because if you remember, they were family. So one day, while he was outside sitting at the gate, waiting for news from the palace, Mordecai heard two men talking. These two men were palace guards. So Mordecai, he listened very closely. The guards sounded unhappy. In fact, they sounded really angry or mad. Mordecai couldn't believe what he heard. "Let's kill the king," one of them said. "Yes, we need to get rid of him," said the other man. Well, God had put Mordecai at the gates at just the right time. So he quickly sent a message to Queen Esther. So Mordecai sent a message to Queen Esther. And he said, "Two guards are plotting to kill the king. You must warn the king," the message said. When King Ahasuerus called for Queen Esther, notice he's very happy right now. When he called for Queen Esther, though, she told him of this news or this plot. She told the king what Mordecai had overheard. The two wicked guards were then arrested and quickly punished for their crimes. Everything that happened was written down in the king's royal record book, including Mordecai's name, because Mordecai had actually saved the king by overhearing what these two men were saying. This too was part of God's plan. It was God's plan for Mordecai to overhear the guards. It was God's plan for Esther to be chosen as queen to help save the Jewish people and to help save the king's life. We will learn more and more about God's powerful plan in the weeks to come. Okay, so this week is all about King Ahasuerus and Esther, and how Esther was used by God in order to protect the king. So this week's Bible verse is, who is in charge? Who will sit on the throne? So here we have the throne, and this week's Bible verse comes from Romans 13:1. It says, "There is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God." So once again, the verse is Romans 13:1, and this is a hard one, or a longer verse. There is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Now, just a quick little review. If you remember, who is this. If you said King Ahasuerus, you are right. And who are these ladies? If you said that they are ladies that want to be the next queen meeting with King Ahasuerus, then you are correct. This over here, who is this Jewish girl? If you said Esther, then you are correct. Who actually ended up becoming the queen? Esther became the queen. What did Esther do for King Ahasuerus? What did she do to help him? She warned him of the plot. She told him that men were going to kill him. Okay, so next time, hopefully we can focus on a special lesson for Mother's Day, because next week is Mother's Day. Okay, but I hope you've learned something new this week about Esther and what a strong and spiritual lady that she was. And I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.